Hey, it's Antoinette Lattouf here with the Weekend Briefing, and today I chat with Reuben Kaye. He's a comedian known for his drag comedy shows. If you're not familiar with the name or the fabulous lashes he wears, you probably know that pretty divisive joke he made about Jesus on the project. Yes, we touch on that, but we also talk a lot about his dark humour, and the way he thinks it derived from things like being diagnosed with ADHD, coming out early, and also his Jewish ancestry. And despite the fact that he had relatives who survived the Holocaust and awful conditions in concentration camps, how they found a strange and dark way to laugh about it. So, Reuben, welcome to the Weekend Briefing. So you're in the business of making people laugh, but I want to start by asking what makes you laugh. Like, what are you watching or listening to at the moment? Or are you one of those hard eggs to crack and you're just kind of like, yeah, not funny?
No, I laugh at anything and everything. I mean, specifically, any kind of toddler falling over will always get me. It's a big Schadenfreude moment. Mm-hmm. Anyone falling over, slapstick. I was raised on slapstick. I was raised on Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy. So the harder the fall, the bigger the laugh. And I'm a huge klutz. I'm 6'2" and mostly knees and elbows and very weak ankles.
So the bigger the fall, the greater the injury, the bigger the laugh?
I think it's that fine balance, isn't it? Where the bigger the fall, the bigger the laugh, but the greater the injury, that's when the laugh subsides. You have to know that they're on some level okay.
Well, ideally the video cuts out before you have to find out, right?
Oh yeah, no one wants consequences.
That's right. Forget context.
2024 is not the year of consequences or context or nuance. We both know that. I think also the big part of Schaden, those great videos where there's one that I watch a lot, which is a man walking across the street and he's busy yelling at a car for something and he doesn't realise that he walks straight into a pole.
So good.
Oh, like it's so satisfying deep in your soul. And I think we're all at such a tense moment now. Everyone really needs to know that there's always someone worse off than them. I think that helps us as humanity. I mean, it's not a good part of our humanity, but it's an intrinsic part of our humanity.
Yeah, we're just one pole away from being really happy when someone collides with it. But when exactly did you really believe that you were funny? Like funny enough to make a career out of it?
Oh God, I don't know if I can tell this story. My mum once when I was 3 years old, my mum was having a cocktail party and she told me a dirty joke to recite. And then she put me up on the dinner table and I said this joke. And the 8 people at my mum's dinner party fell apart. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And I think my mum went, oh, this is going to be terrible.
Yeah,
and
right.
It was sort of set in motion from then.
And both were correct.
Both were correct. The first movie I ever saw was the Marx Brothers' Night at the Opera. I was always raised to be, I think, some sort of neo-vaudevillian nightmare.
And you know,
lovely.
And here you are, fulfilling that. I want to talk about obviously I want to talk about your upbringing, and you've mentioned your mum who, you know, parenting points for that. There's alcohol, inappropriate jokes, a toddler standing up in front of everybody. I mean, she's got to write a book for how to raise children well, because you have existed on the margins in a few ways. Obviously, as someone who is queer, as the son of Jewish post-war migrants, how much has that influenced your ability to perhaps laugh and find humour in dark places?
I think it's intrinsic to it. I think it's the reason why I find humour in dark places. Gallows humour comes from people who have proximity to the gallows. And I discovered my queerness. I learnt about queerness in the 90s, which is not necessarily our greatest epoch. And certainly as from a Jewish family, and not like a strict Jewish family, right? Sort of just associated. I was the victim of a drive-by circumcision. That's how casual our Judaism was.
What is the drive-by circumcision?
It's where the rabbi doesn't even stop. He just clips it and runs. we had an aunt who went to Auschwitz, and she ended up going twice because she escaped and was caught and sent back. And in her own words, when I was a kid, I was like, "You went twice?" In her own words, she would say, "Yeah, I had a bit of weight to lose."
Oh my gosh.
Very, very dark humor, always. There's a great, another great moment is my mum used to say, "You can't make jokes about your great aunt, Paula," because she went out. I always thought she was a bit unkind as a person, a bit harsh as a person. And my mum said, "You can't judge her too harshly. She went to Auschwitz and that changes a person," which is true. And then from the other room, my grandmother would shout, "Paula was a bitch before she went to Auschwitz."
Oh, I freaking love that. That is the best.
So there's this...
I mean, and awful.
But isn't it fantastic?
But also the best.
It's brutal. But this is the thing. This is the way you dispel the boogeyman, is you laugh at it. You poke fun at it. And that's where those jokes come into play. And I think every culture has those. Every ethnic group has that.
Do you think it's easier to be funny if you have trauma? Like, do privileged people have to dig a bit deeper?
I would find it very difficult for someone incredibly wealthy and white to be funny, but it does not stop them trying.
It doesn't stop them from having multiple shows and outlets and, still performing.
Here's the other thing. I think funny is funny.
Yeah.
Funny is funny. People are funny. You look at someone like Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She comes from an incredibly wealthy family. She's incredibly funny. I don't necessarily think trauma is the key to humor, but it does give you access to a certain type of humor, maybe. Also, I would be very interested to find someone in 2024 who doesn't have some kind of trauma in their life.
Yeah, this is true.
Who doesn't have a boogeyman they need to laugh at.
Yeah, well, we've all got our baggage. Drag is part of your show face and performance, and I want to talk about audiences and how much they've changed in recent times and how they respond to drag, because drag and discussions around trans communities have really been politicized and weaponized in the past few years. And as an observer and an outsider, with far more hostility than previously. So do you feel the reception to you and the treatment of you has changed?
Yes, I do. When I first started, a lot of the humor I had to use to work in the crowds I was performing for was based in conflict. It was, I'm gay, you're straight, there's a war, and I'm rebelling, right? So it was based in conflict. And as in the last few years where the acceptances grows, drag races, we're all in the spotlight, it started to become more about celebration, unity, and that was the humor, and uniting everyone against a common enemy, a common boogeyman. But now how do I put this? The audiences I have are very supportive and they know what they're coming to, and they are often very sympathetic. It's very rare that I'm performing for people who aren't cognizant of the politic and aren't supportive. And occasionally what I get is people coming up to me after a show and being like, "Do you know what? That's not my kind of thing," or "I didn't think it was going to be my kind of thing, but I had a fantastic time."
Oh, that's great.
And it's that vibe of going, "Oh yeah, if you just dipped your toe in, you'd find that the water's great."
Yeah.
Here.
And I'm keen to see...
Every so often... Oh,
you go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, there are moments where I think queer people are being exposed to a much wider audience who wouldn't normally seek them out. And that's where this conflict is going. You look at, when I go on TV and suddenly I'm in someone's living room and they're reminded that the world is a very big place with a lot of parts that they might find shocking, distasteful. And then they have to reconcile that with their own worldview.
And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I suspect you've been asked a zillion times, but you've touched on beaming into people's television rooms. And I want to address that infamous Jesus joke on the project that offended a lot of Christians. Would you do anything differently if you had the time again?
No.
That's
I don't think I would.
That's the long and the short?
Look, as a joke, it's actually incredibly tame. Given half the stuff that comes out of my mouth and other comedians' mouths, it was a pun. So if you just talk about the joke itself, it had development setup payoff. It had context. There was a reason to tell the joke. I don't think anyone is owed an unoffended existence. And I didn't specifically call for harm against anyone. I didn't call for a dissolution of an entire religion. I didn't really do anything like that. And the response was out of proportion, unthought, and violent. And I think we can just look at it and analyse it from that. A joke meant that I received death threats and my safety was threatened. Is that the society we want to live in?
So how do you walk that line between pushing boundaries and respecting people's beliefs? Given, there are those who would argue that tolerance and inclusion should go both ways.
I don't believe anyone's beliefs I don't think I should respect someone's belief if that belief calls for my direct harm or the harm of my people and my community. Not every belief needs to be respected. We can't tolerate every belief because that will lead to intolerance. It's called the tolerance paradox.
Is it safer perhaps, and I'm seeing a bit of a shift in comedy, to be self-deprecating? You've got a bit more leeway. For example, if you were to make jokes about the minority group that you belong to, and that I can make certain jokes and I can push boundaries as a brown woman, and then you can push jokes and boundaries because you belong to different intersections and different communities.
I was making a joke about my community. That joke, in context in there, was directly related to the hate I receive from Christian people online. That's the direct context of that joke. So it was actually a joke that I have a right to say and a joke I have a right to tell. That's how I think of it.
Sure. I want to talk, I know you spend time touring overseas as well, the UK in particular. Are audiences different abroad? I'm keen to know. What Aussie, or is Aussie humour? What's the reception like in the UK? Or
I think the Australian humour and the British sense of humour are very closely aligned. Yeah. Very closely aligned. We have very similar societal core values, and that is defacing public property and drinking, and a massive distrust of politicians.
Yeah, right. And a fascination with the royalties, even though we know we don't need them.
Absolutely. A morbid fascination with the royal family and a love of ribbing, a love of pushing boundaries, a love of, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that, but we all think it. We all have that kind of the love of banter. You can say, look at the amount of Australian comics who do well in the UK more than, I would say, some American comics. It's because our senses of humour are so aligned, but also culturally, I think we have a stronger link because the British dumped their prisoners here. And that's who we have now as our high and mighty.
And you're currently touring. What can audiences expect? I mean, beyond your signature fabulous lashes.
That's it. So the new show is called Apocalipstik, and the logline is "The end of the world will be fabulous."
Oh.
It's about the end of the world. It's about the fear. I wanted to address the fear that I have, the trapped feeling, this slight feeling of, if not hopelessness, then certainly helplessness in the face of the overwhelming waterfall of shit we're all facing. We open up our phone and we see war in Gaza. We see Russia expanding and expanding and expanding. We see all of these threats. We see the US kind of devolving. We see our own country kind of trying to find a way within all of this, like Australia's a player in any of this, when everyone's doing, oh, actually, we just really want the money for the submarines, and can you just shut up?
Yeah.
And can we please have some more gas and oil?
Yeah.
And we see where the environment's going. There was some awful statistic that was like, 30, maybe half of kids under 18 don't think they'll live past 35 the way the climate is going. Like climate anxiety for young kids now is huge. I really do feel like everyone thinks the world is ending. And I wanted to make a show that would address that, be able to poke fun at it, but also remind people that helpless doesn't equal powerless. And that small, fabulous rebellions that we're all capable of are a way of taking back a little bit of control and reminding us that we're all going through the same thing and we're all part of something greater. Also, I have a fabulous uncle in East Berlin who has an amazing story that I use as an allegory for this. And he was nuts. He was a clown. He was a bank robber. He was a prison inmate. He was a pornographer. I just think it's a great story to tell as well.
You sound like you have the most fascinating relatives. Can I come hang out at a meal?
Please do. And yes, and bring someone from Netflix, please. If they can find $50 million to give Dave Chappelle to make transphobic jokes, they can find $1 million to help this poor.
Look, this is like taking BYO to the next level. You're like, you can come for dinner, just bring your own production company and $1 million. Like, come on.
I don't. Well, look, as we all know, yeah. It's not going to happen, but it would be lovely. Come over and hang out. I'm sure your family is exactly the same.
Yeah, they're a bit.
I think
they're a bit nuts. Yeah, they're
nuts.
They're layered and colourful and traumatised and everything in between. But I do want to go back to this sense of fear that the world is ending. Have you given up hope? Where are you in that continuum of despair?
I would like to say that my hope is. Oh God, my hope is TBC. Let's say that. But I have so many examples of amazing things happening from my family, from the way my family has survived, from the way the queer community has survived. Time and time again, we all have, as a species, survived insurmountable odds. And in many ways, I think the world has always been ending. Every generation goes, oh, well, this is the end of the world. This is the end of the world. And somehow we all muddled through. And the thing that gets us through it is laughing. The thing that gets us through it is comedy, because laughing is a great unifier. You know, it's a great equalizer. We all laugh at something, maybe not always the same thing, but we all laugh.
I love that. And I'm with you on TBC. Like, I don't want to, I think it's not a time for kind of hard and fast rules and projections that haven't worked for us in the past.
Absolutely. The systems we've tried before are not working well.
Yeah.
But just keep a little bit of hope and it's almost like this tentative, I'm not passing judgment yet. I'm just waiting to see. I'm just going to wait and see. Yeah.
You have just listed a whole lot of really morbid and depressing crap. How on earth are you going to make that entertaining?
We do it. We do it. We just did the first season in Perth, and I got to tell you, it had some huge laughs in there. We've got banging original songs by me and Shannon Whitelock, so it's a whole original score of soaring kind of rock melodies, cracking jokes, musical comedy numbers, all the things that people know and love me for. Great moments of me crawling around the audience. We've got a cracking song called Build Me a Man, where I get to build my ideal man from different parts of the audience. It's certainly a time. And by the way, the costumes are fabulous. I know this sounds so cliche, but there's nothing better than walking out on stage and just getting an applause from one of the outfits.
Yeah, love it. Sounds amazing. Thank you so much for your time on the Weekend Briefing.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
That is it for this episode of the Weekend Briefing. It's a place where we have the opportunity to get to know the interesting and influential people behind the headlines. We want to hear from you. Make sure you leave a comment below, like and subscribe. Catch you next week.